Welcome to today's episode of Positively Geared. I'm Alex Augustyniak, co-host, joined by Lloyd Edge, host of the Positively Geared podcast. Welcome, Lloyd.
Hi, Alex. Good to see you. Good to be with you again.
It's good to be back in the studio, Lloyd. We've had a little bit of a brief hiatus with lockdowns here in Sydney, which unfortunately at the moment don't look like they're slowing down at any point in time, but we remain optimistic.
You always got to aim optimistic, but we've had a busy year nonetheless, and property markets have kept us very busy, and very very keen to get some more content out and have our listeners really enjoy some more podcast content from our fabulous guests.
Well, I think, Lloyd, today our listeners are very much in luck. We've got two absolutely wonderful human beings. We've had the privilege of about 10 minutes off air before we've jumped into this podcast recording, but they've already, I'd say, struck us both as lovely individuals. And it's really nice to, obviously, when you see people on television, what we've learned from previous interviews with some of the other block contestants is you don't always get to see, everything behind the scenes with who the people are. There's a lot of, production crews constantly watching you every second of every day and obviously putting out content that they think will respond best with the audience. But a big warm welcome to Jimmy and Tam. They are the husband and wife team from Queensland, winners of the Block 2020. An absolutely phenomenal season of the block. And guys, we're just really happy to have you here with us both. Welcome.
Hey guys.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're pumped to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
So we've got a lot to talk about. I think what we'd love to jump straight into is obviously not everyone has the privilege of winning the block, let alone actually participating in the block. I know there's tens of thousands of submissions that get put in every year to be on the show, but walk us through that experience, guys. I mean, it really is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I'm sure there were lots of highs and lots of lows and everything in between during that period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can start way back at when we received that phone call of that you're on the block. I mean, the casting director, he FaceTimed us and pretty much said to us, like, this is your last chance. You're in the top bunch of people. Give us your final pitch at why you should be on the block. And we literally just spilled everything and we're like, we need this, blah, blah, blah. And his response was, okay, let's do it. And we were it just blew your mind. It was one of the craziest feelings. I mean, I got goosebumps now still talking about it. So, I mean, it's, from that point, it was completely life-changing.
And, from getting that call to, let's say, a day or the day of, production actually starting, at what point did it hit you both and, you can sort of look at each other before you jump into it and say, wow, we're actually on the block. We're doing this.
I think it took a long time for that to actually happen. It didn't even happen at that point. It was later on, I would say about 2 weeks in.
Well, I would say about the drive up. When we drove up to the block for the very first time, seeing the houses, that's sort of that one of those pinch yourself moments, we're here now, no one can take this away.
But at the same time, it still didn't feel real. It felt like it was, I don't know.
A dream,
yeah, definitely. But it was definitely a life-changing experience for us, that's for sure.
From the time you got the call that you're into the block to when you actually started filming and took that drive to the block, what was the time frame? How many weeks or months went by in between that?
2 weeks.
Okay.
2 weeks. So you get off the phone and you've literally got that 2 weeks to build your construction team. So, I mean, you don't get handed a team of builders and plumbers and electricians. You've got that 2 weeks to make sure you arrive at the block with the team you're going to use throughout the build. So it's quite a lot of pressure.
But at the same time, they don't tell you that. You have to, assume. We've watched the block for years and years and years. We're blockaholics. So we knew that there's, we were asking all these questions to the producers of the show, can we start looking for a team and all that sort of stuff. It's not something that they tell you. You've got to ask the questions. And I think that's why our journey went so well as well, because we were constantly asking questions which needed to be asked.
And going through, I guess, reflecting on that unique experience that, I think it's safe to say is life-changing in many respects. What do you think are the highs of that experience and some of the lows? And what do you think you walk away with today that you've, I guess, harnessed as a result of being on that show?
Well, I guess one of the biggest highs is that affirmation that you can actually do what you're being asked to do. I mean, one of the biggest questions we always get asked is, do you actually do the rooms in 7 days? Well, it's actually only 6 days. And goddamn, yes, you do them in 6 days. It's mental, it's chaos. And you don't actually think you can get it done. And I mean, sometimes you get buried down with problems and you're like, we're not going to be able to finish this room. And then somehow your whole team pulls together and just you're able to produce these beautiful rooms week after week. So I guess that's probably one of the biggest highs, being able to, say that you can do it.
Yeah, it's definitely being proud. And also our relationship. I think that's one of the things that that stood out to us the most. It is a testing environment, and the fact that our relationship really did grow and blossom. We saw the best out of each other that whole experience. I saw Jimmy. He was so organised. He was so good at what he was doing. I was organised and good at what I was doing. So we just made such a good team. And to us, that was just so incredibly awesome to walk away and have that. It was really lovely.
Do you think that, as you say, your relationship was one of the advantages that you guys had over maybe some of the other contestants? Did you see some sort of bickering that might have actually held some other people back?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Tam and I both knew what our jobs were. So my job was to run the site. Her job was to do the shopping and do the styling. And, we both did the design. But I think some of the other couples get a bit muddled with whose job's whose. And that's where the bickering comes from. Like I make the decisions on site. Tam makes the decisions off site and in the styling. And we both made the design decisions. So I think, knowing each other's role is very important. And I think that was a massive advantage for us.
Absolutely. I think, just in past experience, when you watch various seasons, you can tell the couples of the teams that are in sync with each other versus the ones that, are not quite as in sync. And interestingly, if you're on the show, you're intense to win, obviously. I think it's not a show that you fight so hard to get onto just for a participation award, although it's obviously a great experience regardless. But you do see those tense moments, particularly as you're winding up towards the end of the season where, things need to be done, and being able to clearly define whose roles what and work as a team is a massive point of difference for sure.
Yeah.
Most definitely. And there's already so much drama happening on set. Like there's stuff that's happening all the time. So you don't want to create more drama within yourself because it just makes it so much harder. So we just stuck to ourselves, did our own thing, and it worked. So we were pretty happy with that.
And when you were doing a lot of the work and things, how'd you go with like having sort of TV cameras in your face all the time and trying to get that? Were they really close up to getting close up shots while you were trying to put a nail in the wall and things like that?
You get used to it. Like you forget they're even there. So like what we try to tell people is that our best bonds with people that we formed on the block were with the cameramen, the sound guys, producers, because they're the guys you see day in, day out, all day, every day. And they become your mates. So you actually forget about the camera being there. It's just like one of your mates hanging out the back. Like, it's not even it doesn't even become a thing. You just forget all about it. And like none of the block is not produced in any way. So we were never ever made to say or do anything or do something again. It's literally full on reality. They were there just filming us doing what we were doing.
Takes a lot of pressure off, that's for sure. So it's a good strategy. I don't think we've heard anyone describe it that succinctly in terms of what they've done when they've actually got on in the background. So compliments to you both. In terms of, let's talk about, Tam, you mentioned before drama. Obviously the experience with the fraudster or the deposit that the purchase of that couldn't complete. How did you feel in the heat of that moment, and how do you reflect on that, I guess, today?
Oh, it is extremely difficult. It's so much happened that a lot of people aren't aware of. She pretty much implanted herself in our lives. Like after the show, we watched the final episode with her and her fiance. They met our daughter. Like it was a pretty crazy experience. It's definitely tainted us watching the series back. The last episode, we can't watch that anymore because of just seeing her in it and all of those feelings come back. So it's disheartened us a lot with going through that. We know that she's definitely got a few mental health issues, so it does make it hard to talk about. So I don't know what she's doing now. I know that she's moved on and living in another country, so she's definitely got away with it scot-free, which I don't know how that can happen, but
it is what it is.
What's happened yet. It's something that Channel 9 never knew was going to happen. It was something that was so unforeseen. So they didn't even know how to deal with the situation as well. And they were incredible for us. They were there the whole way, which we were really grateful for.
Yeah, and like Channel 9 on the block, they did absolutely everything in their power to vet buyers, especially because of COVID and with restrictions of people they could have at the auction. There was a process you had to go through to actually even be at the auction on the day, which was, there to vet people that, didn't deserve to be there. And she just produced so many fraudulent documents and just completely pulled the wool over their eyes. And I mean, I guess one of the biggest sort of downfalls is like no one really thinks someone's going to do that on national TV. And it's detrimental to your image to put yourself all over TV and the internet, So, I mean, it's such an unforeseen circumstance that no one had any idea what to do about it.
No, absolutely. And I think, Lloyd, we see this all the time, although on national TV is unique. But and once again, with the benefit of hindsight, we can sit here today and have this conversation. But I only think it further builds both your authenticity as human beings and also all the hard work you've done on the show as the rightful winners of the Block 2020. Lloyd, we see all the time at auctions. I mean, it's pretty simple. Anyone on a Saturday, or particularly at the moment through a Zoom call, can register to bid for an auction, and you can qualify, put all the right systems in place. But these things do happen in the real world all the time.
Well, it's quite amazing actually, Alex, because I mean, I bid at auctions, quite frequently, several times a month, and just about anyone can register and bid at auction. And then, you're the winning bidder, the hammer falls and all that kind of stuff. And, so I'm always amazed that there's not more stringent measures in place for people who are putting themselves forward to bid at auction. I mean, there were multi-million-dollar properties going and people just putting themselves forward to make bids. And it's quite an amazing process. So it does leave it open to more sorts of that sort of fraud.
No, exactly. And fast forwarding to today, or more appropriately 2 months ago, the property did sell.
Yeah, that was an absolutely amazing feeling to know that it sold. And for us, to know that it sold and we still won the block. So the amount of money it sold for was still more than anyone else that made on the day of the auction. So, I mean, to know that we still legitimately won the block, it was a great feeling. And it sold to a young family in Hampton, which is just the next suburb over where the new block is. So to know that it's going to a family is amazing.
Absolutely. And obviously within that period of time, we were just chatting about what the market's been doing. Fortunately, we haven't seen a dramatic slowdown, since the TV series, if not possibly the contrary. So timing has not been disfavourable, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. So we're just glad that it sold. It dragged on for a long time, and we knew that they weren't going to sell it until they got the price that they wanted for it. So we're just so glad that chapter is now finally put to rest.
Yeah, because it didn't matter where we went. Every day we'd get people coming up and, saying hello and being lovely about it. But the number one question was, has your house sold yet? And, that went on from December last year until, July. So June. So for 6 months, it was that was the number one question wherever we went. So to be able to put that to rest was amazing.
Because it does become debilitating after time being asked that same question time and time again. It almost paints you as such a one-dimensional couple, but unfortunately that's the stigma attached to, I guess, the outcome of that. But I think, we all love a happy ending, and, we're so happy, Lloyd and I, and I'm sure everybody listening, for you both. Obviously now that you've closed one door and another door's now opened and you've bought up on the Sunshine Coast.
Yeah, we have. So we were lucky enough to get a property in Pomona, which is sort of Sunshine Coast hinterland, just outside of Noosa. It's a beautiful, beautiful house with so much character. And I mean, that's what we were looking for in a house. Like, we wanted to find something with a lot of character that we could come in and put our touch on and turn it into our very first family home.
Lloyd and I spend a lot of time talking about property as a vehicle to build wealth. Property is also, for many people, the ultimate goal when we talk about, the dream family home. And Lloyd, a lot of your teachings and your book, Positively Geared, ultimately they cover a vehicle to get to that end destination, building the dream home, building whatever life it is that you dream. In terms of buying this property, what experience did you go through in terms of, defining what you were looking for in a home? Is this something that you believe you'll hold for the next few decades? Is it something that you'll probably fix up and move on at some point in time? What was that whole experience like, particularly with the benefit of going through the block and learning so much along the way?
Yeah, well, we are in a very fortunate position with the amount of money that we made from the block. We're able to buy a house outright and have that asset there straight off the bat. And Tam and I are both in our minds and spoke about this a lot. We didn't want to buy a super expensive house and then that's it. That's what you've got. We bought a fairly well-priced house that we can still put some money into, renovate. And I mean, the market up here is crazy. So, I mean, you'd have to spend a crazy amount of money to overcapitalize up here at the moment. So, I mean, we bought a very modest house that we can renovate. And I think our plan is to keep it. I mean, because we already have that asset, we're able to move on and keep building a property portfolio all in good time. So, I mean, we're definitely not thinking about flipping it. That's not on our minds at all. Like, it's going to be our family home. It's in a beautiful little town, and we're going to send Frankie, our daughter, to the local primary school. So, I mean, I can't really see us moving out of that house until Frankie finishes primary school. But I think we will try and bounce onto other projects with other houses and just keep that moderate house portfolio. So, I mean, we're very simple people, I guess. We're not aiming to own a $5 million house, you know what I mean? Like we're happy just to have a nice house to live in that Frankie can grow up in and then just have a few sort of investment properties along the way.
With that house you bought, what sort of strategy did you have in terms of renovation? So did you actually look for a property that did need some work because that's what you guys wanted to do?
Yes, definitely. Now that we've done the block, we'd never renovated before the block, but now that we've done the block, we really wanted something with character that we could, you know, put our touch on. And it's just so much fun. It's like something that's in our veins now. So we're really excited to see what we can do with this place. We haven't even got in there yet, but we've already got Pinterest boards and things happening. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, our main concern with the house was making sure it had good bones. I mean, because we knew we were pretty much going to tear it all out and, you know, rejig the whole thing. But as long as we could find a house that had good bones and good character, that was pretty much all we were sort of, you know, asking for, and in a good spot.
And in terms of like long term, would you be looking to like maybe leverage off that house to then build a bit of a portfolio in the future? So like maybe refinancing some equity, that kind of thing?
Yeah, 100%. That's 100% our goal. I mean, once everything's up and running and all of our business are running smoothly, we will look at leveraging off of that house to then, you know, finance a couple of investment properties.
Lloyd, we were talking before we jumped on air, so to speak, about some of the trends you're finding this year in terms of what some of your clients are actually looking to do in terms of their wealth building strategies and, you know, whether it's building a portfolio or getting into the market or leveraging off one property into the next. One of the big trends that you've identified at the moment is you are seeing a lot of people looking for those fixer-uppers where they can create that equity at the moment.
Yeah, that's right, Alex. So I've got more and more clients who are looking for properties that they can renovate. A couple of reasons for that. One is simply to add some value so that they can then refinance that equity, put that into another property. So essentially being able to just, if they put deposit into a property, if they can get enough equity back from a renovation, that it's like recycling the deposit and put that into another property. The other good thing about getting a property that needs a bit of TLC is that generally is one of the more cheaper properties on the market in comparison to something that's already had all the work done to it. So you get something that's maybe under the median price in the suburb and be able to add some value to it that way. But I'm finding people are also doing that even with their own homes. So we help people with primary residence properties and they're still happy to find something like Jimmy and Tam, something that they're going to live in, but something that they're happy to put some work into as well to add their own touches and then add some equity, in which case then they can refinance moving forward. And I think that's become a real trend I've seen this year, probably more so than developments to some extent.
I was going to say, I mean, I don't know how intimately, Jimmy and Tam, you've sort of followed market trends over, let's say, the past decade. But, you know, we look at the past property cycle, you know, sort of, let's call it 2014 to 17, where we did go through quite a big boom period in many of the capital cities, you know, particularly Sydney, you know, where we're recording from today, which did quickly come to a halt in 2018 when we had the Royal Commission on Banking. You know, there was the credit crunch. APRA, you know, got pretty involved with credit policy and we saw a big shift in the market overnight. But that period was, for the most part, an investor-driven boom, whereas today we are finding that the majority of buyers out in the marketplace are owner-occupiers. They're looking for that dream home. And, you know, I think being able to buy a property that you can add value to, as Lloyd, you rightfully said, you know, you're obviously not paying that premium. I think in my experience, generally, most buyers will gravitate towards the finished product. You know, they want the turnkey. And, you know, in these market conditions, you're going to have to really pay a high figure for that privilege. So, you know, strategically, while we're not reinventing the wheel, it is a good strategy. And having those skills to now be able to get in and renovate, even if this home you've just purchased might be, you know, a vehicle for you to live in over the next 10 to 15 years or so, you know, that's going to really help you out when you're moving on to those other projects, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was one of the reasons we didn't buy super expensive because we knew we could put some money into it and the way that the market is going. And I mean, it doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon, especially up here on the Sunshine Coast. I mean, there's so many Southerners that are just buying houses sight unseen, and paying way overs, you know, and people on the Sunshine Coast or Queenslanders in general, we can't really compete with the money that's coming up from down there. I mean, our median house price up here, I think, sitting around the $700,000 mark, and down there, you guys' median house price is around the mill 1.2. So I mean, the local buyers up here are really struggling to actually get into the market at the moment. So we're very fortunate that we've been able to get in and get a spot on the Sunshine Coast, because, I mean, even I think as soon as the lockdowns lift down south, it's going to boom again.
Yeah, it's very possible. It's that crystal ball question we get asked every day as to what the market's going to do. I mean, there's two, I guess, most pertinent ways that the government can control credit policy, obviously through the RBA with, the interest rates, there's APRA and credit policy. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 6 to 12 months. I typically find it's easy to predict markets over a longer term than a shorter term, particularly when there is so many moving parts to the market we're in. But I think well done, guys. People listening to this podcast today, Lloyd, I think once again, it all comes back to strategy. It is hard. I'm finding, I mean, even down in Sydney, there's other buyers that are entering a lot of the key markets here where, people have grown up, they've gone to school here, all their mates are here, and they're also struggling to move up the ladder in these markets. So I think it's just, strategy is so important, isn't it, Lloyd?
Oh, absolutely. You really need to look at what you're trying to achieve. And like you guys said, you simple people, you're looking for a good house to bring up Frankie and things like that. You don't need to be spending multi-million-dollar houses and things like that. And that's so important because you look at those long-term goals, do up the house really well, leverage off that, build a bit of a portfolio. Yeah, that sort of strategy is so important. And you can diversify that, of course, into some other states where it might be worth investing into, that are affordable and everything like that. But I think people are just trying to get into certain markets and just overpaying and spending and we're seeing that a lot with first home buyers struggling to get into a Sydney market or a Melbourne market, completely maxed out, missing out on auctions every week and so on, and then still struggling. I think that's where strategy is really important and consider, should I invest in a property somewhere else that's cheaper, or should I consider living somewhere else? And I think what we've seen a lot from the pandemic is actually people moving away to some of those regional and coastal markets. So we've seen people moving away from Sydney and Melbourne so that they can maybe have something that's a bit cheaper, maybe something with a bit more space where they can have an office where they can work from home and those sort of things. And it's more affordable. And that's pushing up regional markets as well. So it's good if you're investing in those areas, but it's much more affordable to buy in those areas.
Absolutely, Lloyd. I mean, even my personal experience this year, I'd say 40% of my customer base have sold up in Sydney to move to the Central Coast. And basically, you ask the question, why? Well, housing's affordable. What's interesting is it's a bit of a cause and effect because we're seeing, retired parents that are deciding to cash out of Sydney and retire up the coast, whether they're buying acreage or, a waterfront property, albeit at a much more affordable price. And then all of a sudden the kids are saying, well, hang on a minute, why are we spending $1 million to live in a 2-bedroom unit in DY? We can buy a house up there. We can possibly live mortgage-free depending on their financial position. So I think this trend will continue, and that obviously will influence some of the other markets that, haven't been quite as prevalent as our capital city markets, Lloyd.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting because we're talking a lot about the Queensland markets in this recording. And when we look at what's happening in Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast, Brisbane particularly has been a market that's been talked about for a long time and hasn't actually had a lot of growth since about 2006. We're now actually seeing it really move at the moment. We're seeing that in the Sunshine Coast. I've been buying up in the Sunshine Coast for a few years now, predicting that things were going to happen there, and things are really starting to move now. And now with the Olympics coming, I think there's a good future there, and I don't really see things slowing down. I mean, obviously it's going to go in ebbs and flows, but I think there's some good potential in a lot of these markets, and you don't always have to be investing in buying in just the capital cities. You get into these regional markets. I mean, even a place like Toowoomba where there's about $81 billion worth of infrastructure that's going in there. Look at those sort of markets and get in there while the price point's still affordable.
You beat me to it, Lloyd. So how does it feel as Queenslanders to know that the Olympics, Brisbane, well, I mean, it's a long time away, but I mean, it seems to creep up pretty quickly, but that's very exciting news for the whole state.
It is exciting, but I'm not sure how we feel about it. I don't know. It's going to bring, I mean, it's great because it's going to bring a lot of growth to the area. It's going to bring a lot of jobs to the area. But I mean, in this, I don't know, just in this economic climate that we're in at the moment and with COVID and everything that's hanging around it, it worries you a little bit that the whole world's going to be coming to us. I mean, it's a bit daunting.
I'm just hoping, hopefully we'll be out of lockdown by 2032, right?
I sincerely hope so.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be much of Australia left if we weren't.
I think I think any major world event like that, Jimmy, you touched on a few things, infrastructure, jobs, that's all great. Once again, there's so many crystal ball questions at the moment. How long is it going to take to get us to a stage where COVID's just, a thing of the past, albeit whether it ever becomes a thing of the past is another question. I think, it'll probably be classed as some form of flu. that we just learn to live with. But, it will be interesting to see as an observer on the sidelines what that does for the Queensland property market. I mean, we've had a lot of people, Lloyd, I'm sure you've had phone calls too, just asking more questions about Brisbane and surrounding areas because, when there are major infrastructure projects, that generally could be a sign of a good place to look at.
Absolutely. Well, that's one of the things I'm always looking at. And that's one of the things we're always doing research on in-house is where the government's spending money, what infrastructure is going in, where the population is moving to. And traditionally, there's been about 1,500 people a week moving to Brisbane a week prior to COVID. So there's always been that kind of stuff happening there. So there's always been that sort of potential going on there. So, doing all that research is really important. It gives people confidence. What's happening at the moment, though, is that the prices are just absolutely taking off and going well above what people can actually afford. And as Jimmy and Tam said, there's these buyers from, the southern states who are buying sight unseen and paying ridiculous prices. And then, we've got people who are trying to buy, within a certain budget that they might have been able to buy in 6 months ago, simply can't afford to do it now. And they're wondering how they got left behind. So again, it comes down to strategy. They may have missed the boat, may not be the best area to buy in, or may need to look at regional Queensland. So there's all sorts of things about strategy when it comes to buying there.
Jimmy, Tam, going through the experience you did on the block, you've clearly learned a lot of things along the way. Buying into a part of the world that, would it be fair to say you're fairly intimate with, you know it quite well? How important would it be to use a buyer's agent if you didn't necessarily know that area too well, or particularly in the market conditions like we're talking about today where, a lot of buyers through FOMO, fear of missing out, are forgoing the building reports, they're forgoing the strata reports. Do you see value and importance in having an advocate that can work through those things with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you are unaware of the area that you're buying your house and, the condition of the houses, then having an advocate, someone that's experienced in those areas and knows how much you really should be paying, so because as you're saying before earlier, people are just paying way overs for houses at the moment, sight unseen. And then, again, foregoing the building and pest inspection. Then if they move up or they come up without seeing the house and then realise the house is full of termites, it's not livable. So having a buyer's advocate that can do all that research for you and point you in the right direction to make sure you're not going to put yourself in a ridiculous financial position where you're just struggling for air the whole time is super important.
Yeah, we've heard on the grapevine around here time and time again where people have bought up here in the Sunshine Coast from down south and they've moved up and the house that they've got to completely demolish. So it's definitely something that's a valuable process, that's for sure.
Fast forward to today, the block is behind us now. You've closed that door, now having sold. What's in store for you both over the next 6 months? Next 6 to 12 months, what does that look like for you both? I know there's a few exciting things in store we briefly touched on.
It is super exciting at the moment. We've just finished filming season 1 of Renovate or Rebuild, which is another sort of show along the same sort of lines as the block. It's a lot less work for us. We don't have to get as dirty as on the block, but we've got that. We've also we've started our own design business called Captain and Queen, and I'm also in the process of attaching a plumbing business to that as well. So we've got a few exciting things going on at the moment. I think the hardest thing for us at the moment is because we both come from working full-time backgrounds, myself 6 to 5 every day. Tam's the same, she would do night shifts and something like that. So we find ourselves sometimes sort of, if we aren't working all day, we're like, are we failing? Like, why aren't we doing something? But it's just because we're not used to that, that structure of, it's all there, but it doesn't have to be, 100 mile an hour, 12 hours a day. So, I mean, it's exciting, but it's also daunting.
But it is kind of nice.
Yeah, it is
nice. Kind of nice.
And compared to, I guess, being very green on the block, we spoke about becoming mates with all the production crew. How does it feel like now, when you're sort of in the driver's seat? Is it a different feeling or?
It is a different feeling. Yeah, it is. Because, I mean, that when we obviously went onto the block, we were just, like, I guess, lack of a better word, like puppets. We had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea about the industry. We've learned so much about the industry. And I guess our biggest problem is self-worth. So we're very, I guess we're humble people. So the hardest thing for us to do is to try and put ourselves forward and know what we're capable of achieving.
Exactly. And it's quite intimidating going into an industry that it is filled with, really prominent people. So it's kind of finding where you belong in that industry, and we're giving it a crack.
We're giving it a crack. We are. We definitely are. I mean, a big thing for us is imposter syndrome. I mean, sometimes we still sit down and go, "What do we even belong here? Like, what are we doing?" But I mean, these opportunities just keep coming at us. So I mean, we must have done something right on the block that people still want to work with us. So I mean, we're just going to ride the wave and just keep on doing what we can.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. And I think, there are so many renovation shows and, the housing space on a worldwide basis. You just need to jump on Netflix and you'll see, Selling Sunset, $1 million listing across, there's a Sydney one that's just been released on Amazon Prime. People love, particularly in Australia, we love to talk about property. Property is something about our country that everyone wants to be up to speed with what the auction clearance rate was on the weekend. Everyone wants to talk about the next suburb to boom. People take a keen interest, even if they're, passively looking to buy or invest. Everyone's got some degree of interest in property. And I think, with so much content already out in the market, what makes your work so unique is the both of you, and people clearly have a compelling reason to watch you both, and I think that's compliments to the both of you. That is your unique selling point, the two of you.
Thank you.
That's lovely.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, don't let the self-doubt kick in too much.
No, we're getting better at dealing with that.
Yeah.
Getting better.
Oh, that's good. And at the moment, we've done well today, Lloyd. We've sort of touched on COVID, but we haven't spoke about it all too much. I mean, it's in everyone's social media feed at the moment, in every news alert that comes on your smartphone and what have you. But we do want to move into a bit of a conversation around renovating, any tips and tricks that you guys have learned on your journey. Lloyd, renovating is critical in creating equity, or manufacturing equity is the term in your book Positively Geared is. In simple terms, that is basically allowing people to create instant value overnight in their property.
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at properties and then what you can do to actually add value to that. So for our clients, that's about whether they can paint it. So firstly, I guess cosmetic stuff, whether they can paint it, do the floorboards, the floor coverings, the window coverings, updating the kitchen, the bathroom, maybe some landscaping, things like that. And then maybe obviously some more structural type stuff depending on the budget. And then, getting a valuer to come in there, value it to see how much the value has increased since what it was before that renovation was done. And then looking at whether we can then take some equity out, maybe refinancing 80% or 90% of that improved equity to take out as a deposit to move forward to another property. But I'll be really keen on what Jimmy and Tam might like to sort of have some input on some of their renovation tips, because I think a lot of our listeners would be pretty keen to, because a lot of my clients are out there at the moment sort of renovating their own properties, or in the process of buying properties to renovate.
And just before you guys jump in, so back to my point where I digressed for a little regarding COVID, what we have found, and I'm sure you've both seen it too, Jimmy and Tam, the emergence of a few things as a result of COVID. One's the home office. And something else which I believe you've spent a bit of time in the space is, micro-learning spaces for school students, because, at the moment there are lots of parts of Australia where, they're not in the classroom, they're studying or learning from home. These are two things that really, we wouldn't have placed much importance on them, 24 months ago. But now, if you are, whether you're marketing a home for sale or you're looking for a home to buy, whatever you're currently trying to achieve, they're two really important things that people need to strongly consider when they are renovating or looking to buy or sell a home.
Yeah, absolutely. The home office has become so prevalent now in all renovations that are happening. People are trying to make sure that whatever they do and whatever floor layout they're doing in their renovations, they can fit that home office in, not only for themselves, but for the kids. Everyone's having to do the homeschooling now, but what our tip would be is try not to get too caught up in making a special space for a home office. What we've found with Frankie, our daughter, when we homeschool her, she's more proactive when we can sort of move her around a little bit. So not just having a desk or the dining room table, that's where school is, that's what it's going to be. Take her out into the yard, make a few different spaces. What you could do is make a desk out in the yard. You do know what I mean? Like you could, it doesn't always have to be internal. You can find ways of getting electricity and all that sort of things, and just making that space, more fun. Like, we're all moving away from that whole office situation and trying to, incorporate our work more into our life and not making our life work. That makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think, this will continue beyond COVID to be, very prevalent. We're going to see a lot of changes in how we operate as a society. I think, particularly working from home, that, a lot of big corporations were pretty quick to jump on it. But now even in small business, it's becoming more and more prevalent for people that, don't necessarily need to be at a desk 9 to 5, unless, of course, they're like us, Lloyd, and they're constantly out in the car seeing people. Obviously, COVID safe with, with our masks and sanitizer. What are some tips and tricks, guys, that you've found have worked really well for you in terms of in that space, whether it's, I know, Jimmy, you just mentioned, moving, and it's a good idea. You just said, why does a home office have to necessarily be inside the home? Can it be an outdoor office space? There's so many cool things that people listening to this podcast today can implement pretty quickly with a bit of imagination.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, natural light is a major source of, self-enjoyment, I guess. I mean, if you're working in a very dark space, then you're going to feel like you're locked in a jail kind of thing. So, I mean, if you do have a home office, then I would definitely suggest some skylights or some highlight windows. I mean, getting that natural light and the sunshine into that space can really make a big difference in a space. I mean, a lot of people tend to get away from skylights because they think they're super expensive. I mean, the skylight itself is not that expensive. It's the installation that's expensive. So if you are, a bit of a DIY guy and you can have a go at it, then it's really not that hard, and it makes a massive impact and also adds value to your house.
Where do you see the importance of, the old adage is, kitchens sell homes. Kitchens and bathrooms, obviously wet areas in properties are generally the most expensive for most mum and dads to renovate. Where do you see their role in terms of adding value to a property? Is it still really important to get those spaces right? Working from home, a lot of people are becoming TikTok chefs. Everyone's swiping through their feeds looking at some new recipe to make. How important is it to also not overlook, the more traditional parts of a home renovation?
It's definitely important. I think the kitchen is the heart of the home. The kitchen is where a lot of families do spend most of their time. So it's somewhere that really needs to be well thought through. The planning process is the most important part of that. The layout of a kitchen is inevitable. Like if you get that wrong, it can stuff up the whole house. So it's so important. And as well as bathrooms as well. You don't spend too much time in bathrooms, but you shouldn't be anyway. But it's still somewhere that needs to be beautiful. There needs to be a lot of light. It needs to be something that you're drawn to. So
yeah, and those spaces, the kitchens and the bathrooms, that's what people fall in love with when they walk into houses. I mean, they see a bathroom that they've never seen before, or a kitchen that's got everything they've ever dreamt of, and then they will do anything to get that house.
Yeah.
So they don't really care what the bedrooms look like, because anyone can renovate a bedroom, and it's not that expensive. You can change the paint color, you can do a feature wall, but when it comes to kitchen and bathrooms, as you were saying before, they are the expensive ones. So if you've done that for a potential buyer and they fall in love with what you've done, then they're going to do anything to get that house.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny, actually, because one of the first houses I bought as a primary residence was exactly that. It had this, and I was single at the time, absolutely amazing kitchen. It had just everything, just the most amazing appliances, amazing splash packs, really big stone bench tops and everything like that. The rest of the house needed heaps of work, needed heaps of paint work and all sorts of stuff. Kitchen, absolutely immaculate. So I bought the house. I didn't even cook or anything. So the kitchen was completely clean all the time because I never even used it, but I bought the house solely for that reason. So what the previous owner did obviously worked for when I went to buy that house.
It's so true. It's a bit like us. I mean, when we last moved, which was actually very recently, we've got a beautiful kitchen, but at the moment, in lockdown, when you're not able to be as mobile as you'd like, because, you can only run Manly Beach so many times or walk it so many times down here. Before you get a bit bored, we've been basically eating packaged health food meals every week. So, you get this fancy kitchen and then all I'm using is the microwave. It's quite silly, but it's nice to have, right? It's really nice to have.
That's all I did. I just used the microwave, right?
Yeah.
And the rest of the kitchen I wasn't even using, but I bought the house solely for the 60 mil stone bench tops and everything. So
doesn't matter whether you use it or not, you've got it.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's what it's about.
Leaves a good impression with your guests, although you can't have many of those at the moment down here anyway. So.
Yeah,
no.
So true.
Guys, moving on, we've spent a lot of time talking about, homeowners, home renovators, investors. What about people? Because the other trend in the market at the moment is that, a lot of people are selling up. They're capitalizing on what appears to be, or what is the, the strongest market we've seen in many geographical areas as the strongest market in the history of these suburbs since the beginning of time. And some people are strategically, based on their situation, deciding possibly to sit it out for 6 to 12 months while they might re-strategize or work out where exactly they want to be. Is it in Sydney? Is it in Queensland? Is it a regional part of Australia? So on and so forth. For those people who are renting at the moment, do you have any tips or advice around how to make the most out of a space which is not ultimately theirs, where they don't want to start ripping down walls and doing extensive renovations? But what are some quick hacks you've found that work really well for all sorts of shapes and sizes?
Well, you're asking the right people because we've rented our whole lives. So this is something that we're so used to doing. We're used to renovating a house. Well, not renovating. We're used to styling a house that we can't renovate. So it's all about, you can change light fittings. You can put beautiful lamps in a room. You can rugs, create different spaces. You can add floor-to-ceiling curtains, which also make your room appear longer and taller. And plants are something that can change a space massively. So all of those things, when put together in a room, can really change the space. And it's something that's not really expensive as well. It's something that's achievable for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with Kmart and all those sort of shops that have very cheap styling options. I mean, you can literally go onto Pinterest and type in Kmart lounge room or something like that, or cheap way to style a lounge room, and you just get miles and miles of inspiration. So I mean, there's definite ways of making a rental space feel like your own space and make it feel like a good home. But yeah, as Tam said, I mean, for spatial awareness, tall things, mirrors.
Drawing your eye up.
Yeah, drawing your eye up to the ceiling. Mirrors usually make a pretty big impact on a small space. They make it feel a lot bigger. And I mean, yeah, it's easy to do, but I mean, some people do find it hard, but it can be done.
I was going to say, just listening to you rattle those things off, I mean, that, you guys are the real deal. That's some great advice. Probably substantiated it better than I do sometimes, even after, having similar style conversations over the last decade. One thing that I wholeheartedly agree with you on, and the good thing is it doesn't discriminate whether you're a homeowner, renovator, styling a home for sale, wanting to add value. Indoor and outdoor plants, I think, creating greenery, obviously it promotes good health too, further oxygen. Plants are proven to actually reduce stress levels. There's so many benefits of going green. And I think, for the future moving forward, there's going to be more and more emphasis on, the landscaping, both internally and externally of properties.
We actually style our home with a lot of stuff on Kmart, including like cushions and also plants and stuff. So not even only for people renting, but just, it's cost-effective furniture that can actually look quite good as well. So I think that's very, very important, particularly for people if they're paying rent or they're paying a mortgage, and then they've got to look at how they can actually style things in their home and stuff for cost-effective as well. So I think that's really important.
Or Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah, we get stuff through there.
Oh, yes.
That's where I was about to go. Facebook Marketplace. I mean, one man's trash is another man's treasure. I mean, that's a rule that's gone around and around for years and years. So, I mean, there's always good bargains to find there, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And there's nothing like putting your own little spin or touch on something and bringing it back to life. It's really rewarding.
Oh, look, I've got to say, guys, if I had $1 for every time my partner, she's messaged me and said, I just found this, can you go pick it up? I wouldn't have to work anymore.
And then you go and pick it up and it just sits in the garage for 2 years.
Yeah. Or better yet, in my instance, getting it into the car is a bit of a challenge, so you just don't pick it up at all. Should have bought a ute. Jimmy, Tam, we've really enjoyed our time with you both. Once again, I think you're both a great success story, not just being defined by the block, but it's great to see that you're getting out there, you're doing new things, your new project sounds really exciting. Just remind people listening what that's called so they can give it a listen.
It's Renovate or Rebuild. So it's going to come to the screens on 9 Life in October. So tune in. There's a heap of other ex-block contestants. I mean, the true faves are on this show. So, I mean, it's going to be a good show.
That's awesome. And Lloyd, lots to take away from today. They've got some really great advice. A lot of the advice I love because it can be applied to any part of your property journey, whether you're renovating, fixing up, in between, building a portfolio. There's a takeaway, I think, today for every single person that'll listen to this podcast.
Absolutely, Alex. And I think Jimmy and Tam are just so down to earth as well. you guys can really relate to the everyday person, which is the sort of clients that I work with, who are just looking to try to get ahead. Couple of properties, renovate their properties, do whatever they need to. Got a lot of clients who are rent vesting, so they'll rent where they live and buy investment elsewhere. So your tips on how to style a rental home is really, really great as well. But it's been fantastic, and we've had a great chat and really appreciate you guys coming on.
Thanks for having us.
We've had a blast.
Thanks so much for your time, guys.
No worries.
Thank you.